Well, welcome everybody to Learn Biz, the small business podcast where we try and cover a variety of business topics, different things that are going to impact the success of your business. So, Ethan, you came across some articles. I think this is some study you've been looking into with the idea of imposter syndrome.
Right.
And this is really interesting because this hits in all aspects of life, but it seems like it's predominant, or I shouldn't say predominant, but it's It's very heavily apparent, I'll use that way to describe it, in CEOs, entrepreneurs, people in a management leadership type role.
Correct.
And so we're gonna dedicate the episode today to looking at imposter syndrome. I have to admit that as I was reading up on the articles that you shared with me, I definitely have imposter syndrome. I don't know that I'm the worst offender, but it was kind of funny. I was like, if you have any of these, I'm like, I have a couple. I didn't check all the boxes. And so, but I did check some of the boxes.
And that's what fascinated me when I kind of come across the term, and then came across an article in Forbes, and I chased an article that then was in, let me make sure I get the website right, Very Well Health.
I mean, we talk wealth on the show, but no, okay. Very Well Health.
It can be a long episode. Verywellhealth.com that, I thought each article was fantastic. Each one of them coined it just different enough to where I thought there was value in both, which is why I sent you both. There was another one that referenced a study, a Sage journal that if we have time, maybe I'll reference as well. Yeah. But when I read about it, I thought this is fantastic because we're always talking about leaders, becoming better leaders. And when I saw this, I'd never heard the term before, but when I read about it, I was like, oh, I've experienced that.
Yeah.
Which I don't know how anyone, like you had mentioned, that's an entrepreneur, CEO in any leadership position hasn't. And so when it brought it to my attention, I thought, oh, this is good because when you finally recognize what something is, now you can deal with it in a healthier way, a more proactive, productive way because sometimes it can manifest itself and it can be ugly.
And so I'm going to give my concluding statement right here at the beginning, and then we actually will get into the beginning part. But one of my big takeaways, because there was a part in the article that it said, is imposter syndrome, is it like a mental illness? And it said, no, it's not diagnosed as a mental illness. But it's interesting. You can easily get into this idea of, oh, this is what's wrong with me. This is what's wrong with me. This is what's wrong with me. And I really want to look at this more. And this is how I took it is I want to understand who I am, what motivates me, where my weaknesses are, so that I don't put myself in an awkward position or a position where I feel inadequate. And so that's kind of my concluding thought is to say, hey, you know what? Everyone has something. If this is one of your dragons that you have to slay, fine, slay it. If this is just a side issue, fine. But
both articles are very clear that it's generally not a syndrome that is just persistent, meaning it's always there.
Yeah.
It hits during certain events, and I'll in fact, let me just read it because I think I wanted to start with this.
Can we give a definition of imposter syndrome real quick?
Yes.
So, okay. If you're not familiar with imposter syndrome, it's the idea that when I get promoted to a new position or take on a new role and I feel inadequate and I feel like I'm an imposter, like I have to fake it, like I'm lying, like I'm pretending to be something that I'm not. Maybe there are other people who are more qualified. I shouldn't be in this role. And it's really interesting because it's an internal thing. In the article, it did state that most people who have this are actually very well qualified, do a great job, but internally they feel like they're doing this horrible job. So that's the quick of what imposter syndrome is.
Or the fear. You got to put the fear of failure in there as well, because if I fail, then I really wasn't competent to do it.
Right. I shouldn't have been the one to do it.
Yeah.
Oh.
So failure is a key word in there as well, if that fear of failure is existing as well. But so along with that, but here's what's super interesting, and is that the imposter syndrome is most common when we're trying to do something new,
right,
or feeling pressure to achieve something.
Yeah. Which is entrepreneurship. I'm trying something new and feeling pressure to achieve something. Yeah. And I really want to clarify, trying something new doesn't mean that I'm starting or launching a business. It can be that. But if you're in business and maybe you're trying a new technology, maybe you're hiring a new person and you've got to train this person, maybe you're going after a new market segment. Like, new can be literally anything that you haven't done before.
Yeah. Yeah. It could be any aspect of the business that you just have not done or tried before.
Yeah. So with that really broad definition, and I think it said, and maybe you've got this in your notes right there, 70% of all female entrepreneurs.
Yeah, 75%.
Okay, 75% of all female entrepreneurs.
Well, and what's interesting about when you go back to the original imposter syndrome and when it started, the studies were all related to women. They didn't even look at men.
Yeah, because they assumed that this was a female issue.
Correct. And so in the beginning, they looked at everything around women and why is it causing it. And anyways, so that's the kind of the cool part, is that it started very gender based. Now, as time went on, then they says, well, wait a minute, does this actually affect men too?
Yeah. Does it hold water to isolate it to one gender? Yeah. Which it doesn't.
It doesn't.
The recent studies show that there is not any significant difference between gender and imposter syndrome.
But it does say that it manifests itself differently by gender, male versus female.
Yes. So how you respond and how you feel internally, but having imposter syndrome still hits. So that's interesting because it didn't state this in the article, but we could extrapolate here. If 75% of female entrepreneurs are feeling this, and there's no difference between male and female, are 75% of male entrepreneurs feeling this? Probably.
Yeah.
And I wish it would have clarified that a little bit in the articles, but probably.
But they said that it was equal. Well, there were a few places they made comments that it was studies now, more recent studies as they've looked at both genders, that they didn't find any difference between it affecting them equally.
Yeah.
So if it was 75% back then in the original studies that they did, it's certainly got to be 75% of males that are experiencing it as well.
Okay, so we've established that if you're an entrepreneur, you probably have imposter syndrome. This is a show for entrepreneurs. So, hey, we're talking to the right audience. I'm wondering, there were, I believe, 6 points right at the beginning.
Yeah.
And I think those are worth just going over.
Okay.
Do you mind just reading those 6 points?
So these are common either thoughts you have or feelings that you have that kind of help you understand, am I experiencing imposter syndrome?
Yeah.
Okay. So fearful you will be discovered to be a fraud, meaning that I'm maybe not qualified, or maybe I don't know what I'm doing. Maybe, that the whole fake it till I make it, because we say that all the time,
right?
Well, we're just going to fake it till we make it then. So next one, believing compliments and praises are because the audience is being nice and not because it was earned. Right?
I struggle with that one.
But I can see that one.
Yeah.
Especially if you are in a leadership position, you walk by as the CEO and they're, oh, how are you doing? Right. Well, you're just kissing my butt.
Right.
Yeah.
Not sucking up right now.
Yeah. So next one, feeling unworthy of success.
Okay.
Which I don't know that I feel that one as much, even though I don't like attention brought to me. So I guess I understand it at some level because of that. I don't like to, just let me do my thing. I don't want to be in the spotlight, right?
Yeah.
So if someone wants to bring it up, then maybe that's there.
Or, I think this idea of, and this connects to some of the other ones that you're going to read in a second, but feeling unworthy of success, this idea of, well, I didn't do it. I just kind of, I'm just here, or
I was just the team lead. The team did it. They did all the work.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
okay. All right. Fourth one, feeling like it was luck, not talent, that got you where you are.
Which, that one I struggle with, because I see a lot of entrepreneurs that from an exterior perspective, I think it was luck. Like, dude, you were at the right place at the right time. And there is a huge factor of luck. And this has been, it's not just my opinion here, this has been documented that there is a significant luck factor that goes into entrepreneurship.
Yeah. And maybe jumping ahead while we're talking about luck, because as soon as I read that one, my first thought was, but, can you obtain and maintain? Okay. Mm-hmm. Is one thing that we always look at success. If you did it once, can you do it again? Right? If you can do it again, then it wasn't luck. Yeah. It was skill. It had some level of education and talent that was tied to it. So a lot of times when you look at that, that's a question you got to ask is, hey, have I done something like this before? Then I should be able to do it again.
Right.
And we'll talk more when we get into how ways to overcome it.
Yeah.
Last two. So feeling anxious or depressed. Okay.
90% of the population right now. So
yeah. So everyone has imposter syndrome. And the last one, and this is interesting because this one is not uncommon, and I relate to this one, feeling undertrained. Right? Because we're always trying to better ourselves, but there's always something, for instance, if I'm in a leadership role and all of a sudden there's an HR issue, but I don't have a solid background in HR, and I have to kind of deal with this one, or I'm getting involved with it, I'm going to feel inadequate or undertrained.
So we did a podcast episode probably 2 years ago at this point, and it was the isolation at the top. So CEOs feel very isolated.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing, I want to tie this into the undertrained problem. So when I'm a leader, ignoring the luck factor, if I got into a leadership position, I usually got there through a lot of skill, study, hard work, and it's hard to find advisors at that level. It's hard to find someone to train me when, here I am, and I'll just use me as kind of a case study real quick. I do a small business podcast. I train other small businesses. I have literally been in front of thousands of business owners telling them how to better their business. And so you better believe that I have this hard time where I'm like, okay, if you're training me, you better be legit because I study this stuff. I eat this stuff for breakfast. And so if you can't share, if you're going to pull up a little YouTube video and, you're a YouTube expert and that's your level of training, don't waste my time.
Oh, and it's funny that you bring that up because I just had a conversation just this morning. It wasn't business related, but it was interesting how so often we look at a YouTube video and we see how easy they do it. And then we go and try it and it's nothing like it, right? You're like, wait a minute. No. Nothing worked out. I mean, they did that in 2 minutes. I'm 20 minutes into this one and I'm not even halfway done.
Yeah.
Right? So all of a sudden you get that. And I think that's what happens a lot of times when you talk about this imposter syndrome and on the business side and your professional life is that sometimes if we know someone else, matter of fact, that's one of the things it does talk about is comparisons. That can I do it as fast as them? Can I do it as well as them? Mm-hmm. Can I achieve it at the same success rate that they did? And if I'm not, then all of a sudden I have that imposter syndrome.
Yeah. So I want to jump to something that I found fascinating about the article. Both articles, independent articles, right? Both articles brought a key element to imposter syndrome back to your childhood and your family life.
Yeah.
And I found that really interesting. One hit on specifically if you as a child felt like you were compared unequally to your other siblings.
Right.
That was a clear path to you feeling imposter syndrome, which to me is interesting because I guess maybe this is how my brain is processing this, but I feel like it would go the other way around. Like if you were held to a higher standard that you would think, oh, I'm better. But no, it actually seems to make you feel like you have to prove something.
Well, when I read that one on family expectations and how that creates some, anyways, it can have repercussions in the future, even if it's positive, not meant to, it's not done in a negative way. But so I look at, and I shouldn't, I'm going to air my dirty laundry. So,
so it makes it exciting. Let's get juicy here.
Right. Because with some of my kids, for some reason, they feel that I have a high expectation for them.
Yeah.
Right. And through conversations recently with my wife, some of this has come out, and I'm like, oh, that's interesting, because yeah, I do want the best for my kids. I do want them to try their hardest. I do want them to succeed. Okay. However, I understand they're individuals and they have to have some of that own autonomy to do it. But for them, some of their drivers or some of the reasons why they tell me or don't tell me stuff is because they feel that I have some expectation of them in their life that they don't want to, out of fear that I'll let them down or they'll let me down or whatever else. I thought, oh, great. This is bad, because when I saw that, all that flashback to that I've created at some level in my kids an imposter syndrome.
Yeah. I don't think that this is at all unique to you. You just described every single father on the planet.
I hope so. Well, I hope that, because there are some bad dads, but
yeah, that's true.
But any good dad, I don't know why you wouldn't want your kids to be better than you are.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's really interesting. If you're struggling with imposter syndrome, you kind of do need to go back to that family, whatever family environment you grew up in, whether it was a stable environment, an unstable environment, if you had, even if you had no siblings, it's still, it seemed to have more to do with a parent-child relationship and expectation.
Yeah, and it could even be, I always thought as well that, if you have a very overachieving older child, for the younger children, they feel like they have to live up to their standard. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But as a parent, that each kid is so different. You can't treat them equally, and we do our best not to treat them equally, even though at some level you kind of do, so that it doesn't feel like that you're playing favoritism. Mm-hmm. But I could see that just even amongst, if you had an overachieving a sibling, that it could create some imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
Not even tied to a parent.
Yeah. Super interesting. So, all right, I've got imposter syndrome. What do I do?
Well, all right. So there are some ways to overcome it. Okay. But before you jump into that one, I want to talk about the kind of, they list some types. So I think you need to understand the types, because then the overcoming will make more sense, if that's okay. So we're gonna pause. We're gonna jump back. Okay. So the first type that's done in the, I'm never gonna get this website right. It just doesn't.
Verywellhealth.com.
Thank you.
It will be in the description. So if you guys can't
understand, I can do the Forbes one all day long.
If you can't understand Ethan, links in the description.
Now I'm getting imposter syndrome. Oh my goodness! All right, you stick with that one. I'm going to stick with Forbes.
Okay, fair enough.
Forbes.
We're a team here.
I do enough on Forbes that, because when everything health related websites are always kind of weird how they word it for me. Okay,
so
all right. So the types.
Ironically, my wife owns a personal training company.
Yeah,
and so I'm familiar with this website.
Are you really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. I would have, first time when I got led to it was the first time I had been there.
Yeah. So.
And I saw some other stuff on there that I would like to read. So I'm sure I'll be back on it, because there was some other articles at the bottom. Hey, if you like this one, here's some others.
Yeah, there's some good content there.
Okay. So back to the types. So first one, if you find that you have a personality type where you're a perfectionist, that you got to be careful of that, because what you'll find is that small little mistakes or other things will start eating at you, and then, oh great, I can't do this, right?
Yeah.
The expert, if you feel like you have to be the expert, and sometimes I'll coin it as the know-it-all, even though I don't. When we reference the know-it-all, we play it as bad, but it's not necessarily that. Is that
tread lightly, because this is one of my weaknesses here.
But if we feel that I should be knowing something and I'm in a conversation and I don't know about it, then all of a sudden I feel that imposter syndrome creep in.
Yeah. So that one's interesting. I just went to a trade show and I was in Paris, and I speak French fluently, but this was technical French. And I thought to myself the whole time, I have to be perfect. And everyone there, they were just grateful. They're like, hey, you speak my language better than I speak your language. And they were all impressed. Yeah. But for me, it wasn't good enough.
Okay. So you would fall into that one.
I do fall into that one. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think a lot of us do at some level, depending on what it is. But that's a great example of, the soloist. And we kind of know those people that, I can do this myself. I don't need others' help.
If you want it done right, do it yourself.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So if you have a little bit of that, I've ran into some people that fit this category, but I don't see it very commonly, just the natural genius. So meaning they measure their worth by how and when the accomplishments happen in terms of ease and speed. So
I have seen this a lot, and I'm going to use an academic example.
Okay.
It's interesting to see 4.0 students. And there was a study that was done.
That would make a lot of sense. Okay.
There was a study that was done, and I apologize. It's an old study, and so I'm just trying to remember. But the takeaway from the study was that in real world business, students that had high GPAs like a 3.8 or a 3.9 tended to adapt better to workplace environments than 4.0 students. Now, I do believe that the way that the grading has happened, I think that's changed a lot, so I can't vouch for if that's still the actual case. But the concept here, and that's what I really want to hit on, is that when you have someone who they have to have the 4.0, and that's how they determine their worth and their success, versus the person who's like, I want good grades, but if I get an A minus, there are people that they get that A minus and their last day of school, instead of signing yearbooks with their friends, they're in class doing extra credit to just notch it up. And so that's where I would put that genius. And if we think that ends when you're out of school, no, there's another way to measure the 4.0. It just measures differently in the business environment.
Well, and this is on the academic side as well, as you bring that up. So here's one way, and this isn't in overcoming, but as you were talking, it reminded me that if you work around kids who are smart, and like all my kids, one reason I have always encouraged and highly encouraged my kids to play high school or anyways competitive sports is because if you have a student who's a 4.0, that means they don't understand failure, right? They've never failed a test, right?
Yeah, and that's a good point.
So if you play competitive sports, you're going to lose somewhere, whether that's a game, whether that's because they stole the ball, whether that's because you missed a shot,
right,
whatever it is going to be, right? You're going to experience some failure at some level so that you can learn to deal with it, right? Because if you haven't experienced failure and the first time you go to a job interview and you don't get it, I've seen people just fall apart because they've always just got whatever they've done because they were so smart.
Yeah. And I would think, so bringing this mentality into the business realm, I'm looking at like maybe you have an accountant or an engineer, someone whose position in the company is very structured. Yeah. So an accountant, like you get it right or you get it wrong. There's not a lot of gray in that space. But good accountants or great accountants are ones that understand that, okay, sometimes the paper and the reality don't match, and I've got to be creative to find these solutions. The bad accountants are the ones that are just like, this is what it says on paper, this is what we do, no ifs, ands, or buts. Right. And I'm not saying that you need to adjust policy or cook the books. I'm saying that you've got to understand that even in your perfect world, things are not going to be perfect.
Yeah. The last one, and I'm just going to tell it what it is. I'm not going to go too much into it, is that if you found that category where I'm superwoman, superman, super student type of syndrome, which I think we understand. So, okay.
read the description of that, because I don't.
Okay.
Sorry, this one resonated with me.
Okay.
We're gonna move a little.
No, that's fine. So if I'm a type where I'm a superwoman, superman, or a super student, this type measures their accomplishments by how many roles they can juggle and excel in.
And the reason I wanted you to read that, so that came right from the article. The reason I wanted you to read that is because I've seen a lot of CEOs that take on too much.
Amen. Okay,
And
good point.
And that's something. If you're the CEO, and when I say CEO, I mean if you're the owner, whatever title you give. I don't care the title. I'm talking about the role.
Yeah.
But if you're the one who has to come in and save the day, you're really hurting your company. You're really holding your company
Especially
back.
if you think you're the only one that can save it.
Yes. And so there are a lot of super women and supermen out there that don't build up their their up and coming management. They can never take a day off because they're like, well, everything's going to go to pot. If they're the ones that they have to be making the decisions. They won't allow a team to make the decisions. They won't take direction from a board. Like, they're the ones that are saving the day. And so anyway, I did want to hit on that. I think we covered that enough. Well,
okay. Now on the how to overcome it, I want to cover both some from the Very Well Health and Forbes, because they were just different enough that there was value in both looking at those. So from the Very Well Health, they talk about, just realistic goals, which, I think it's Motivosity. They had one of their VPs. I listened to it at a recent summit, and he said something amazing about goals that kind of changed my perspective, and I'm going to try to figure out how to implement it more into what I do this next year.
Okay.
But he was saying that, and he used the world high jump, as an example. So the world high jump is, I think, 8'2". It's something crazy.
Something crazy, yeah.
Okay. So he said the problem is that the world high jump is 8.2. So that becomes the standard of the goal. If you want to be if you want to actually say you accomplish something, you have to be able to jump higher than that. And he turned to the audience and he said, how many in here can do that? There was not a hand that came up. I think he lowered it. He says, all right, what about 6 feet? Who in here thinks they can get over 6 feet? I think there was maybe one hand, and there was, an auditorium that was packed,
Yeah.
Okay. And so anyways, so basically what he said is, so why do we set these ridiculous standards for ourselves when we don't have the ability on a number of levels, whether that's skill, education, physical ability, et cetera, to accomplish, to use that as a standard? Why are we putting that as a standard when we know there's no way you can achieve that? And so his point just trying to be, look, you need to make sure that you're realistic in what you're doing so that you can achieve it, so you can have some success, so that you can move from there. Because if that's your standard and all you do is attempt and fail, you can't build any value as an individual if you're not thinking that you can actually obtain it. Now, if you put it at 5 foot and I jumped and I just barely nicked it and it went off, okay, wait a minute. If I work and tweak a few things, I can probably get this, and it might take me 20 tries, but if I know I'm close, but 8 foot, when I can't even jump up and touch it with my hand, there's no way.
Yeah. I hate the expression, shoot for the stars and hit the moon. Mm-hmm. Like, if you go with anything, if I'm going to throw a football, do I ever want to throw it past my target? No, I want to throw it to my target. I want to see where I want to throw it, and I want to hit that target. I want to get it to the receiver directly. I don't want to make him have to run another 10 yards because I overshot. And so, no one going to the moon thinks, hey, we're going to plan to hit that star and hopefully we'll stop at our right place. It's such a dumb philosophy to say, if I overshoot, then I can be okay with my failure. I'm like, no, give yourself a realistic target, achieve the target, celebrate the win, and that's one of the strategies is to celebrate the wins. Yeah. But be realistic, achievable, and celebrate.
Yeah. So let me go through a couple of these other ones a little bit faster. So recognize your expertise. Define what success means to you. Stay away from toxic competitions. I'd love to talk more about that one, but let's.
Okay, finish your list, and then we'll pick a couple and dive in.
So set limits and boundaries and avoid overworking. That one kind of caught me by surprise, and the reason that they put that in there is because in the articles, women tended to overwork to compensate for the imposter syndrome. So that's why that one is in there. So if you're a female, you probably are relating to that one. If you're a male, relating to that one. Anyways, know that avoid overworking. Know that you are competent and you should be in that role, right? Yeah. Practice responding to failure in a healthy way. We've talked a little bit about that one. Remember, no one's perfect. I think we forget that too often. And then the big one, ask for support when you need it. That's, as a leader, a lot of times we almost always fail to do that one.
Yeah.
So, all right, you want any comments on those? And then, because those were all from the Very Well Health, and there's just a couple from Forbes.
Just the avoid toxic competition. This is what I'm going to say. In my estimation, over 80% of all competition is toxic.
I agree. Totally agree.
And you might think that it's not. You might think that when you're putting sales goals between your different, sales managers, and you're like, okay, let's just see how we're doing. And when I say toxic, I'm not talking that everything is detrimental. Oh, no, I don't mean the word detrimental. I'm not talking that everything is completely destructive. But I'm saying that if you're going to allow toxicity into your business, you're going to deal with some of the repercussions of that. And so the second that you start comparing people, you got to be really careful. I think kids have kind of figured it out, and I'm talking little kids before we've been
indoctrinated.
Indoctrinated their minds with our society. But little kids, what do? They're like, Mom, look at me. And then they just do whatever silly thing that they're proud of. and that really needs to be kind of the mentality. But the second you throw competition in there, anyway, I'm starting to rant a little bit, but I think that the majority of competition is toxic. So be aware.
See, I always say competition means that everyone should be on the same seat in the bus.
Okay.
The route of it is we need people in various places in the bus to balance it so that it's the most efficient and gets toward it. If we put everyone in on one side of the bus, it's all going to lean, right?
Yeah.
So anyways, that means that we're not taking into account for their own unique expertise, skills, education, abilities.
Yeah. Okay. I think if you're getting them to compete against themselves to raise their own standard, regardless of what someone else is doing, and we're going to touch on this in the Forbes piece, so maybe I'll let you get to that. But, when you're competing internally to just raise your own standards and be more proud of what you have been able to accomplish, that's healthy competition.
Yeah. All right. So the few that came out of Forbes was identify that negative self-talk and look for the facts. So meaning they say in there like, hey, I never achieve anything. Well, is that really true?
Right.
Especially if you have a pattern of having successful implementations of products or sales or whatever else. So you got to really look for the facts and stay focused on the facts, not the story that you're going to make up in your mind. Mm-hmm. If you read anything on, now it just slipped my mind. High stakes conversations, things like
crucial
that.
Conversations.
Yeah, and crucial conversations. Yeah, crucial confrontations, all those. They always say, hey, look, you got to be real careful about creating a story in your head that's not based off facts. And as humans, we're notorious for doing that.
Well, and I think just a quick point on this is to say the fact that you are in business, if you're a small business and you haven't shut your doors down, you're actually beating the odds.
Yeah.
And you have something to be proud of. Even if you're like, I can't make payroll, I'm super stressed out. I'm like, guess what? you still have gotten further than a lot of other entrepreneurs have.
Right.
So be proud of those accomplishments and those achievements.
Well,
and
that's the second point that they bring up. Just remind yourself of your accomplishments.
Okay.
So keep talking, but that's the second point that Forbes brings up.
Well, and I was just going to say this thought of even if you have failed as an entrepreneur, failure is not the same as giving up. And so if your business failed, I honestly would be more inclined to hire someone who launched a small business, failed from that small business, and can show me some positive follow-up than someone who, just inherited a business and is just living off of the proceeds. Like that failure is not a problem. It's an opportunity to learn and grow.
Yeah. The last one Forbes brings up, which is a lot of times tough, that's get a mentor or a sponsor at work. So mentor, someone that can mentor you. The higher you get up in a food chain, it always feels harder to find a mentor. And I think the problem is we're always looking for a mentor who we think is smarter than us.
Yeah.
My attitude is I think your mentor needs to be one. They don't need to be smarter than you. One, they need to be able to listen to you. Two, they need to be able to give you critical feedback. And three, they need to help shift your paradigm, how you think, right? So if you can have someone, regardless of whether you think they're smarter than you or not, if they can help do that, a lot of times just having that shift as you have those conversations can fix that piece of what you're trying to solve.
Well, and shameless plug for this program, you can use LearnBiz and programs like LearnBiz to fill in some of that mentoring.
Correct.
If you don't have someone, we have digital knowledge at our fingertips. And so if you don't have someone, you're a solo entrepreneur, or you don't feel like you've got the right environment for that mentoring, that's kind of what this stuff is for, is to help you. And those 3 points that you talked about, look at this through that lens.
Right. All right. So just in summary, from my perspective, is that, look, imposter syndrome does exist. If you're aware of it, you can recognize it and now put healthy measures in to help offset it so that you don't become your own self, destruction key. And I like the fact that at some level, I almost say, look, it's kind of normal if you're taking on a new project, a new challenge, or you have something amazing you're trying to achieve, it's going to be there. Just recognize that is going to be part of that natural process. Like you trip and fall on the sidewalk, whether you like it or not, embarrassment at some level is going to come in. If you can offset it faster than later and shake it off, you can get up faster versus sometimes, I'm so embarrassed I don't even want to get up, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, that's what imposter syndrome is trying to do to you versus, look, everyone trips, just get up.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. No, that's excellent. So I think we'll wrap up with that. Thank you so much for tuning in. This has been an episode from LearnBiz here with Ethan Miliori, Ryan Murray. If you want to reach out to us with any questions or comments, you can catch us, Ryan at learnbiz.co, Ethan at learnbiz.co. Love to hear your comments. You can check us out on YouTube. The handle is at Ryan Earl Murray. If you like to see some of the shorts that we create out of this. But thanks so much for tuning in, and we will catch you next time.
Thank you.